The winter winds howled across the new settlement like angry ghosts. Snow buried the cabins to their windows, and every breath came out in a cloud of white. The settlers had come chasing dreams of land and freedom, but now, with frost clinging to their eyelashes, it felt more like a frozen prison. Among them lived a quiet man named Hiroshi, small in stature, polite in manner, and always wearing a calm smile even when others cursed the cold. No one knew much about Hiroshi. He had come from far across the ocean, speaking in broken English and carrying only a few wooden tools and strange ideas. While the settlers stacked logs into roaring fires that still left their cabins freezing, Hiroshi spent days digging a pit right into the floor of his hut. They laughed when they saw him. "That fool's building a hole to sleep in," one man joked, shaking his head. But Hiroshi just bowed slightly and kept working. When he finished, his cabin looked odd. The fire wasn't on a hearth. It was sunken below the floor, surrounded by stone, with a wooden frame built above it. He called it a rori, the sunken hearth. The settlers mocked it, saying it would choke him with smoke or burn his floor down. But when night came and the temperature dropped to 30 below, Hiroshi's window glowed warm while theirs frosted solid. That made some men uneasy. The next morning, a young trapper named Samuel passed by Hiroshi's cabin and noticed something strange. The chimney barely smoked. "Ain't no way that fire's still burning," he said. Curiosity got the better of him, and he knocked. When Hiroshi opened the door, a wave of soft heat rolled out, wrapping Samuel like a blanket. Inside, the man's little home was warm, cozy, and filled with the smell of roasted fish. Samuel blinked in disbelief. How do you do this?" Samuel asked, rubbing his hands. Hiroshi smiled and gestured to the sunken fire. "Fire low, heat stay," he said simply, tapping the stones around it. "Air move, smoke go up. Warm stay down." Samuel crouched, feeling the warmth radiating across the floor. It made no sense to him. How could a smaller fire heat the cabin better than the settlers' roaring ones? That night, word spread around camp. Some laughed harder, calling it Hiroshi's magic hole. Others grew curious. One older settler, Martha, who had lost 2 sons to frostbite last winter, visited quietly. She didn't laugh. She sat beside the sunken fire and closed her eyes as her bones thawed. When she looked up, she saw tears forming in Hiroshi's eyes. "This, my home in Japan," he whispered. "There, winter kind. Here, winter cruel. I make warmth same way." For the first time, the settlers stopped mocking him. They began asking questions. How to build it, how deep to dig, how to keep smoke away. But not everyone approved. The settlement's leader, Mr. Grady, saw Hiroshi's growing respect as a threat. "We don't need foreign tricks," he warned. "This is how fires have been made since our fathers' fathers." Still, whispers of Hiroshi's warmth spread faster than the cold wind. As the blizzard worsened that week, several settlers' chimneys froze solid. Their fires choked and died, leaving cabins cold and damp. But Hiroshi's home kept burning steady, safe, and warm. He invited the sick and the children inside, offering them broth and blankets. By morning, the frostbite on little Ellie's fingers had stopped spreading. Her mother, weeping, kissed Hiroshi's hand in gratitude. Outside, Mr. Grady stood watching through the swirling snow. The glow of Hiroshi's cabin pulsed like a heartbeat against the dark night. Jealousy tightened his jaw. "He'll ruin order," he muttered. "They'll start following him instead of me." In his heart, he began to plot something that would change everything, an act born from pride, not reason. But inside that humble cabin, Hiroshi was unaware of the storm brewing in men's hearts. He only smiled as he handed soup to the children, whispering stories of his homeland, of snow festivals and paper lanterns, of warmth made by patience, not power. And for a fleeting moment, in that frozen wilderness, the settlers felt something they hadn't in months: hope. The storm raged for 3 long days. Snow piled high enough to bury fences and block doors. The settlers huddled in fear, running low on wood and food. Only Hiroshi's cabin stood like a small beacon of warmth. He had kept the fire low and steady, just as he'd learned in his mountain village back home. One by one, families began to send their children to him, desperate for shelter. By the 3rd night, his tiny cabin was full of shivering settlers. When Mr. Grady saw the crowd gathering there, his anger boiled. You think that foreigner can save you? He shouted to the men at the tavern. He's showing us up. If we rely on his way, we might as well hand him our land. Fear mixed with pride, and by morning, a few men followed him through the storm toward Hiroshi's home. What they did next would scar the settlement forever. They burst through the door shouting, "This ain't your land, stranger." Startled children cried as Hiroshi rose calmly, bowing slightly. Grady kicked the sunken hearth, scattering embers. The flames hissed and smoke filled the air. "You bring your tricks here and make fools of us." Grady snarled. Hiroshi didn't fight. He only said softly, "Fire is not mine. Fire belonged to all." But the men stormed out, leaving chaos behind. When the wind blew that night, it carried sparks from the broken hearth across the room. By dawn, a part of Hiroshi's cabin wall was blackened with smoke. Yet when Samuel and Martha came to check on him, they found him calmly repairing it. "You should leave," Martha said tearfully. "They'll blame you for anything." Hiroshi only smiled. "If I leave, who help when cold come again?" His voice trembled, but his heart was steady. Word spread of the attack, and shame began to grow in the settlers' hearts. The children cried to return to Hiroshi's cabin, remembering the warmth and kindness he gave them. Even some of the men who had followed Grady began to question what they'd done. Samuel confronted Grady, saying, "You burned a man's hearth for pride, while we freeze for ignorance." The settlement, once united by hardship, was now divided by guilt. That night, the temperature fell lower than anyone could remember. Fires in most cabins went out as the winds roared down the chimneys. Panic spread. People shivered, wrapped in wet blankets, praying for sunrise. Then, through the white darkness, a glow appeared again, Hiroshi's cabin, rebuilt and burning softly. Despite the damage, he had managed to restore his sunken fire. He opened his door wide and called out into the blizzard, "Come. Fire for all." At first, no one moved. But when little Ellie ran barefoot through the snow toward the light, her mother screamed and chased after her, then others followed. Within an hour, nearly the whole settlement had gathered there, huddled close as Hiroshi fed them broth and warmth. The aurora burned bright, its glow dancing on tear-streaked faces. Grady arrived last, dragging his frozen pride through the snow. He stopped at the doorway, shivering, too ashamed to enter. Hiroshi looked up, eyes soft and tired. Without a word, he stood and offered Grady a bowl of soup. For a long moment, silence hung between them, then Grady took it, his hands trembling. "I was wrong," he whispered. Hiroshi only nodded, saying, "Cold teach all men same lesson." When morning came, the storm had broken. The sun glimmered on the snow like glass, and the settlement felt different, humbled, united. Men who once mocked Hiroshi now helped him rebuild. Samuel and Martha worked beside him, shaping stones for more sunken hearths. The settlement soon filled with warmth, not just from fire, but from something deeper, understanding. As weeks passed, every cabin had its own aurora. Smoke thinned, fires lasted longer, and food cooked better. The settlers called it Hiroshi's fire, though he always corrected them gently, "Not mine, nature's way." Visitors from other towns came to see the strange floor fire that worked miracles, and the story spread far beyond the valley. But to Hiroshi, the greatest reward was the laughter of children again. One evening, Samuel visited with a small gift, a wooden plaque carved with the words, "He warmed our homes and our hearts." Hiroshi bowed deeply, his eyes misty. "I only show what my father show me," he said softly. "He say, when man make fire low, he make peace high." Samuel smiled, not quite understanding the words, but feeling their truth. Years later, when new settlers came, they were surprised to find such warmth in this frozen place. The villagers told them about the Japanese man who taught them to listen to the fire instead of fighting it. They said his spirit still lingered in every home that stayed warm through winter without wasting wood or life. Hiroshi grew old, his hair silver like snow, his smile unchanged. One winter morning, Samuel found him sitting by the hearth, hands folded peacefully. The fire burned steady beside him, glowing gently under the floor. Hiroshi was gone, but his warmth remained, wrapping the room like an invisible blanket. Outside, snow fell softly, as if the sky itself bowed in respect. When they buried him, the entire settlement gathered. Grady, now gray and frail, stood before the grave. He came from across the sea, he said, voice cracking, but taught us more about home than any of us ever knew. The people lowered their heads, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke, warm and clean, across the frozen fields. Years passed, and the story of the sunken floor fire became legend. Travelers called it efficient, scientists called it ingenious, but the settlers called it something simpler, Hiroshi's gift. Every winter, they lit their fires low, whispering his name as if inviting his spirit to sit beside them once more. One day, long after Hiroshi's time, a traveler from Japan visited the old valley. He knelt beside an ancient hearth and smiled. "Aurori," he murmured, recognizing it instantly. When the settlers' children asked how he knew, he said softly, "Because where I come from, warmth is not just heat, it's love shared." They didn't fully understand, but they felt it in the glow. That night, as the fire flickered beneath the floor, the settlers' descendants gathered to tell the story again, of the man they once doubted, who taught them how to live through the cold by sharing warmth. Outside, snow fell silently, but inside, laughter filled the air. The old fire crackled gently, like it was smiling too. And so, in a place once ruled by frost and fear, the legacy of one quiet man from across the ocean endured forever. His joke had become their survival, his kindness their foundation. Generations later, every hearth still burned low and steady, proof that even in the coldest world, one man's warmth can change everything.